Anthony.
Okay, 1 minute.
Anthony's going to be late.
It is quorum.
1, 2, 3. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
All right. Let's just begin. Begin the beginning. I'd like to call the work session meeting to order. This is Monday, January 27, 2014. The time is approximately 7 p.m. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by sending notices out in December to the Record and the Ridgewood News, positioning notice of this meeting on the bulletin board in the lobby of the Borough Hall, and filing notice of the meeting with the municipal clerk. I'd like to remind all members of the public, we have 3 exits in council chambers, 2 to the front and 1 to the rear. We're on the record, both audio and video. If a member of the public wishes to be heard or seen during the public portion of the meeting, they need only advise us of their name and address, and they can make a statement or ask a question, which we will attempt to answer. So let's just begin the work session by having a roll call.
Councilwoman Murphy.
Here.
Councilwoman Coppola. Councilwoman Bastide.
Here.
Councilman Young. Councilman Eckford-Furta.
Present.
Councilman Papaleo.
Here.
And Mayor Mastroianni.
Present. All right, we have 3 topics on the Borough Administrator's agenda. One is the community energy aggregation, residential customers. We have Mr. Esser from Gable Associates. Why don't you take a seat? Tell us about your program.
Mayor, Council has received extensive information from Gable Associates, from the Riverside Cooperative. I just wanted to make that clear to you that they've had a lot of preliminary information provided to them
Great.
at this point.
Great. So I'll keep my remarks brief and make as much time available for questions and answer them.
Great.
My name is Kenny Esser. I'm with Gable Associates. We're a firm based out of Highland Park, New Jersey, and we do a bunch of different energy measures. We try to focus on economic and regulatory analysis of energy matters. Doesn't matter the project, energy efficiency, solar, third-party supply contracts. We do the analysis behind it and make sure it works and is consistent with the energy markets and the regulations. What I'm here to talk to you today is about community energy aggregation or government energy aggregation. It's the same thing, just some people prefer one over the other. Basically, the concept is it allows the municipality to go out on behalf of its residents to shop for their electricity to try to get them a better deal. Residents may participate in the program on an opt-out basis, and businesses may participate in the program on an opt-in basis. The program, because it's an opt-out basis for residents, comes with several protections that are baked in by law. This was put in place initially, this program in '99, and was amended in 2003 to the current program we see today. The first program to do this was Plumstead in 2012. So why the gap between '03 and 2012? It was pretty simple. The way the energy markets were structured, it made a lot more sense for people to accept the default rate rather than shop for their electricity. Today, that environment is different. Today, it makes more sense, whether you do this program or not, for most residents to shop for their electricity rather than to accept the default rate. That won't always be true, but it is true right now. And so I think that there's a window of probably about maybe 2 or 3 years to do something here and to do some sort of third-party supply contract. So I talked about, initially when they did the law in '99, they actually did an opt-in program for residents, but what that was essentially, a supplier had to go door to door convincing people to sign up for the program. That just wasn't feasible, and so the program just never got off the ground. In 2003, that's when they amended it to make it an opt-out basis. But in doing so, with it being opt-out, they wanted to make sure there were significant safeguards for consumers, right? So they did several things. One, when a contract is entered into, it must be less than the current tariff rate provided by the utility company. 2, the municipality cannot add any additional fees to it. Sometimes, for other deals, the municipality might have some funds going into the general fund. There can be none of that. The only fees that can be included as reimbursables for this are hard costs that can be quantified. Printing costs, mailing costs, legal fees if you have your council review documents, that's it. Everything else is taken on by us, and even all the printing and everything like that. We assume we do it unless you tell us otherwise, and we cover all those costs. At the end of the contract, there's no extension period. So a lot of people who shop for their electricity on their own, at the end of it, maybe there's an evergreen provision, or if you opt out, there's a penalty or things like that. At the end of this contract, which will be between 1 and 2 years, there are no extensions. It's over. If you want to do it again, you have to start the process over from the beginning. And then the second thing, or the last thing is, residents may opt out of this program at any time without any consequence, no penalties whatsoever. So if we do this program and the savings start, just say February 1st, they start February 1st, it doesn't matter if somebody on November 18th decides they want to opt out of this program. They can do it in the next billing cycle. They'll be out, and they'll be back on the default rate provided by the utility company. A couple of things to clear up. One, residents will still get one bill. They still get one bill from PSE&G. On it, in the energy supply section, will show the rate that's achieved in this program, just like anybody else would with a current third-party supplier. Two, the utility company, some people think that they're choosing to go away from the utility company. They're getting away from PSE&G. That's not the case in this program. Essentially, the way the tariff is structured is there's a bunch of suppliers that you don't see that are making up that supply portion of the bill. There's an auction held every February. This year's auction could be in a couple of weeks. The outcome of that auction determines who the third-party suppliers are that are going to supply the electricity, essentially. When that auction clears, it's administered by the BPU. When that auction clears, a price is given. So PSE&G has its rate for its entire energy year, whatever that rate is. Just say it's 11 cents. Every penny of that, when you pay your bill, that 11 cents, all of that goes to whoever the suppliers were. None of that stays with PSE&G, the utility company. PSE&G, the utility company, gets their charges on the wires, the distribution charges, etc. You could think of PSE&G in this case as FedEx, right? They don't care if you buy a book from Amazon or Barnes & Noble. They're getting paid to deliver it from point A to point B. It's the same thing here. They have no horse in this race. Residents who already have a third-party supplier are not enrolled in this program. We don't want to get into competing with other third-party suppliers for them. If they want to get out of their existing contracts on their own, they can do so to participate in this program, but they don't have to. I touched about them receiving one bill. Residents that have budget billing can keep budget billing with this program. To date, our firm has done 7 different municipalities. On the sheet I handed around, it shows the different savings there. You'll notice that there's a little bit of a range. The two that are the smallest, the 8 and the 8.5%, they're the smallest because they're PSE&G towns. The tariff is structured such in PSE&G territory that the margins are thinner than JCP&L territory, where there's much, use the word, fatter margins for them, for us to beat doing these procurement exercises. BPU and Rate Council both are involved in this process. When we design the bid documents, they both go to both of those entities for their review and comment. They have a 15-day window. I think that's the number of days they have. And again, when an award is made and an opt-out notice is drafted, they review that as well. I'll just touch really quickly on process. If you guys were to hire us, the process would be something of the sort. You'd have to pass an ordinance, 2 readings of the ordinance. We'd give you an FAQ document that we've designed to put on your website to educate the public. We'd work with you to set up a public information session, one session, where we come, give about a half-hour presentation and stay and answer any questions everybody has to educate them on the process. After all of that is complete, then we send the bid documents out to bid. They're out on the street about a month. Bid documents come back. On the same day bid documents come back, we schedule it to be on a council meeting. That way, on the same day we receive them, action is taken. That quick turnaround ensures that you get a competitive price as possible. After that, we execute documents, draft the opt-out notices, and then a 30-day opt-out window starts. So if you opt out at that point, then you're out of the process. You never were in the process, so you have that opportunity. But like I said, at any point you can opt out, and then savings start after that. The way our firm gets its fees, there's no fees up front to the municipality. Our fees are a price per kilowatt hour that the suppliers ask to include in their bid rate. And so we do it that way, and so all the risk is on us. So if we receive bids and it doesn't provide adequate savings for us or for you, and we decide to walk away, you guys have incurred no expense. Our fees are totally contingent on that. Businesses, it is an opt-in program for businesses. It's been our experience that it's very difficult to do something for the business community. There's several reasons behind that. One, because it's opt-in, we need them to buy into the process at the beginning before they even know what the rate is. So that's difficult. B, anybody who has a pretty big business already shops for their electricity. 3, we're essentially cold calling unless there's some sort of organized chamber of commerce we can get to and get everybody's attention and paying attention to the issue. And last, in some cases, I think Lambertville is one example, we actually had received bids on the business community that would have provided some of the businesses savings, but not all the businesses savings, so we had to throw it all out. And so that's the difficulty on the businesses. I would just sum up the businesses this way. The reason to do this program is to provide savings for the residents. If we can achieve something for the businesses, that's great, and that's kind of the icing on the cake. But the reason to do this and invest the time is for the residential component of it. With that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Kathleen?
How long have you been in business, your company?
Since '92.
So I get in the mail all the time, advertisements to change over my electricity, and everyone's, it's not really explained very well, and you're suspicious, like, okay, I'm going to get into this, and then after like a year, I'm going to pay triple.
Right.
So I think that's one of the concerns people would have, is that you're kind of lulled into this false sense of security, and then you're going to get slammed.
Yep.
What do you do to kind of assuage that?
No, that's a great point, and that's actually the exact reason I don't shop for my electricity. If my town does it, I'd be all for it, but I don't do it on my own because I don't want to have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about every month, am I paying less than the default rate provided by PSE&G? I get the same guys coming to my door. The way to think about it is this: the people who are coming to your door and the third-party suppliers, it's a little bit like the Wild West. You can get some great deals and great contracts, a lot of it with the same terms that I talked about here, opting out at any time. But you can also get deals where 3 months into it, you're paying significantly more than the default rate, above the market rate. This program, first, we're required by law to be less than the tariff when we do this deal. Second, when we do our savings calculation, not only do we want to be less than tariff, but we want to see at least 5% savings. Otherwise, we say it's just not worth it. And third, when we ask for pricing, it's a fixed price that we ask for the life of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And then last, we're asking for a fairly short window. We're asking for a 1 to 2 year contract.
Mm-hmm.
And that minimizes risk all around for you, for residents, etc. So we know what the tariff prices are going to be that we're offsetting, to make sure that there is never a situation where the rate that we achieve is greater than the tariff rate. Now, with all that said, how do you educate the public? We educate the public in 2 ways. The FAQ document we put on the website, and the public information session we have. And actually, I'd say half of the questions I receive are on that very subject.
Like, we have some people that are not web friendly.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many stuff coming in the mail. Do you guys do mailers?
There's a mailing that goes out initially, inviting everybody to public information sessions. It's about a 1-pager, gives some brief overview of the program, and that goes out to everybody. And that's just a mass mailing with the post office. We say put it everybody in River Edge's mailbox and get it out that way.
Just had another question. So you have here 7 towns that work with you.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no Bergen towns.
Yeah.
What kind of inroads Are we the first ones, or?
Well, we're actually working with Little Ferry, and the bids go out, I believe, it's either this Wednesday or next Wednesday.
Mhm.
The bids are going out on the street there, and I think we're receiving bids back, something March,
Mhm.
yeah, early to mid-March. So that's the first Little Ferry, that's the first Bergen town.
Mhm.
These are only the towns we've completed. Yep.
Your firm has made a presentation for what we call the Riverside Cooperative, which is 16 towns that have a cooperative pricing agreement.
Mhm.
And the cooperative is looking at trying to aggregate the volume of as many towns as they can get to participate in something like this. So the Riverside Cooperative is asking us to amend our agreement with them to allow them to go out and cooperatively price energy aggregation for residential
Through this
customers.
company, or on their own?
Well, that hasn't been decided yet, but just to allow the cooperative to act as the lead agency for this type of a venture.
Like, if we have a cooperative, do our rates go down because we have more people joined together?
I think it'll definitely help you. When we look at the towns, we feel as though once you get to 10,000 households, that's a nice number. And so a bunch of the towns in the cooperative are all small towns, but in aggregate, they exceed well above 10,000 towns. So we feel comfortable that the cooperative will help us to make sure we get a competitive rate. The other thing to keep in mind, though, is the cooperative spans 3 different utility territories, PSE&G, JCP&L, and a little bit in Rockland territory. Not sure what we're going to do with Rockland, but there's a good number that are actually PSE&G towns, so I think you've got good company.
But, I'm sorry, but didn't you say that PSE&G towns get the best rate? So if we're in the cooperative as a PSE&G town, but other towns in the cooperative are
JCP&L.
JCP&L, then wouldn't that by average raise, wouldn't we actually not get a better better preferred rate if we don't cooperate with JC, whatever town?
Yep, so a couple things. When I said that the margins are thinner for PSE&G, one would think that means the rate is more competitive than JCP&L or less than JCP&L. Unfortunately, it's not true. It's actually more than JCP&L.
But you drew our attention to West Orange and to Montgomery, and you said that their rate was lower because they were PSE&G towns.
Lower being the percentage savings is lower.
Oh.
Yeah, so the percentage savings is 8 and 8.5% compared to like Monroe and Plumstead that are 14 or 15%. But
so it's percentage of savings. I'm sorry, 'cause
yeah,
I didn't get a chance to read this document.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So that's one. Two is that when bids are put together, we would probably prefer, because Rockland's a bit of an anomaly because it's so small, we would probably prefer to keep Rockland totally separate from the procurement for starters. Second, a different rate will probably be achieved for both the JCP&L towns and the PSE&G towns. There's not going to be any cross-subsidization, is my point, between the two. And if there was, my guess is it'd probably break more in your favor, because JCP&L prices are a little bit lower in their territory.
Alan, one step in the process that I have a little bit of an issue with is that I think what I would recommend to this council is that we spend the next several weeks, if the council is interested in this, getting the word out, then having sort of an open hearing at that point in time, and having a representative from your company to come back and to answer questions before we make the decision to get into the whole process. I think they would like to hear from the public as to, what questions they have, how they feel about it, before that decision is made that this is something they want to go forward with. So I don't know whether your company would be interested in coming back in a few weeks to have another session when we have a few more people in the audience to answer some questions, and I think that would help us, develop some confidence in what you're talking about and hear from the public before we actually made that decision.
Yeah, we've done that before, but I wouldn't do that in lieu of the public information. So
No,
I'd
that
still
would
do that
still be
too.
required. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like what I did recently in Colts Neck was, I showed up, introduced the concept, answered any questions the audience had, and that was. I think I did something similar for West Orange. So that's fine. We're fine with that.
Good.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that.
So, the contracts normally are 2 years,
1 to 2
2
years. Yeah.
You have these 7 towns here, and you've been in business since 1992.
Mhm.
The law was changed in 99 and 2003.
Yep.
Have these 7 towns, do they sign on with you, like, in the beginning, and they've continued, or have any of these dropped at this point? With your, did you start with them, and now, are they still with you?
No, I think most of these towns are new to us, and I think for most of these towns, don't hold me to this, but I think all of these towns hired us only for the GEA program, so it's not like we've been working with these specific towns for 20 years. I don't know if that's what you're asking or not, but Plumstead had us do a second round. We did theirs in 2012. We did a second round of theirs last year. So they rehired us. The rest of these, though, are too recent to have been up for a second round so far. They just started.
Yeah, I just think the suspicion part of it.
Mhm.
You know, I wish I had all day to, like, go through all these mailers and
Oh, yeah.
figure out, you know, electricity rates and everything else. It's just like, it's mind-boggling.
Right.
The amount of information, and then you just end up saying, "To heck with it, I'll just pay what comes in the mail," and so,
That's
you know.
what I do, yeah.
So the rate is guaranteed to be lower than the existing rate
Right.
when we sign on to the program. And is the rate locked in for the life of the agreement?
That's right, a fixed rate. No escalators. It'll never change.
So the only really thing that could happen is if the default supplier reduces their rate, then the savings would be less.
Right. And so, not going to get too into the weeds on this, but the default supply I talked about in auctions held every February. And what that auction does is it procures a third of electricity supply for 3 years. So when they do it, they're going to be asking for a third of this year's supply, a third of next year's supply, a third of following year's supply, to create a hedge. So every year is made up of 3 different years' procurements, right? And what that does in times of increasing electricity prices is that a hedge pulls the price down. In times when electricity prices are declining, that ends up pulling the price up above the market rate. And that's the situation we have now. So under that situation, so when they have this auction in February, I'm going to know all of next year's energy rate. I'm going to know exactly what it is until May 31st of 15. Know exactly what it is. It's not changing because the auction was held in February. So for next energy year, I already know exactly 2/3 of that rate because it's already been procured. I already know what everybody's bid into it, right? And so I only have to forecast on that remaining third. Of that remaining third, a bunch of that's made up of other different auctions in other places in the energy market. Our region is called PJM. They kind of manage our grid from here out to Chicago. And so those auctions have already been held, and those auctions are 3 years ahead. There's capacity. So I know a lot of the variables here. So for the next energy year, so this energy year we know exactly what it's going to be. Next energy year, we can get it down to within 1% or 2%. So when we talk about 5% savings, that's what makes us feel very confident that there's not going to be a situation where, you know, all of a sudden everybody's in the red. And that's also why, when I said at the beginning, electricity prices are eventually going to start increasing again. I mean, it's just the way the markets are going to work going forward. So there is going to be a time, like if we did this program for you and say we entered into an 18-month contract with about 12 months, or with about 8 months, 9 months left in the program, we're going to come and talk to you and tell you what we're seeing in the energy markets and whether it makes sense to even start revving this machine back up, or if at the end of the program it's going to make most sense to go back on that default rate.
Do you have a sample bill with you, what it looks like?
I don't, but I can get one for you.
Just curious,
Yeah.
Howard.
Yeah.
At any time, any resident can opt out. So
That's right.
if the default is lower than what you guys are providing, residents could, if they're paying attention, can just opt out, no penalty, and just go to the...
That's right. But I also want to be sensitive to the fact that only 10 to 15% of people shop for their electricity. The other 80%, I think, or the other 85, 90%, I think, are with me and Councilman Murphy, not wanting to have to pay attention to that stuff. So while you're right, I want to make sure that when we get these bids, that there is absolutely no doubt in any of our minds that this rate is going to provide savings.
No, I
for the
agree. I
entire
wasn't
place.
suggesting that. I was simply suggesting that if we as the council saw that there was a problem, we could alert our residents to
Yeah,
opt out.
that's right, exactly, yep.
And we wouldn't be in any violation of contract.
That's
By
right.
suggesting to our residents, this was a great deal, you did save money
Exactly.
for the last 18 months, but here's,
Yep,
we have 6 more months, and you guys, everybody should opt out.
that's right. And one other thing
And how long does the opt-out take? A week, a month?
Next billing cycle, so as long as a month.
Okay.
The other thing I want to bring up, just real briefly, is in Lambertville, they did something unique in Lambertville. In Lambertville, they wanted a 100% green option. And so when we went out to bid, we asked for the traditional pricing that we all went over, and we said to suppliers, okay, but we also want this 100% green option as an alternative for people. And so factor into your bid an additional penny and a half to provide that 100% green option. And they did that, and the bids came back, and essentially, you see the savings that are achieved for West Samuel, Lambertville at 10% for the basic program we've talked about here. And for people that went 100% green, they had to opt into that program. They paid about 1% higher than the tariff rate for that in order to be 100% green. And I'm not sure how many people are going to do that, but that's just an option available to you if you feel as though there's people in this town that would prefer that as an option.
1% more than their existing bill?
Right, and so it's not in conflict with the law because they are opting into the program. They're not, it's part of the big pool that has to take an action to get out.
But those people are only buying renewable energy.
100% renewable, Class 1 renewable, that's right.
What about the distribution charges? Is there, if we do this program, is the default supplier, the distribution carrier, are they allowed to increase the distribution charges for only those customers who have opted in to another program?
Nope, it's, look, PSEG may very well increase your distribution charges, but it's not going to be because of this program. And it's not going to be specific to just your town. It'd be involved in a rate case at BPU. But as I said before, they've got no horse in this race. Whether you do this program or you stay with their default supply, it literally impacts the bottom line, not at all.
All right. Any other questions?
Now, when you're recommending that we consider giving the cooperative authority to represent us,
Well, we'll have a resolution on the February 3rd meeting to amend our agreement with the cooperative to include energy, residential energy, as something that they could go out on as a lead agency. So that would be the next formal thing that we would do. And then I would say, come back to the council at a work session. If there is interest, we publicize it a little bit. We have another meeting with Ken or another representative, Gable. Maybe we get a little bit more participation from the public and input, and then you can make a decision as to whether you want to move forward or not.
Is Gable going to return to the cooperative?
or is the cooperative satisfied with the presentation?
Yeah, I would have to say they were satisfied. I'm not sure what you mean by return to.
Well, I mean, is the cooperative, was the sense that the cooperative wants to go forward with soliciting proposals for energy aggregation?
Yes, they're interested in the concept.
All right,
Yes,
okay.
it does seem to be interested in the concept.
All right.
So one other question. So PSE&G, when you get your bill, the figure that you pay is what they've procured from the energy auction. Is there a chance that they're going to make an offshoot company to compete with someone like yourself?
They're not allowed. When the state deregulated back in '99, they separated the generation assets from the utilities, distribution wires, and so they're not allowed. There has to
So
be.
they can't come up with some kind of clever name and then
No,
try to
no.
undercut?
No. They definitely can't do that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Nice presentation.
All right, we have the joint garbage collection bid. Alan?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Several years ago, we entered into an agreement with the Borough of New Milford to go out jointly and bid our garbage collection contract together, which we successfully did. That contract will be up in 2014. I'd like to know from the council tonight whether you're interested in doing another joint bid with the Borough of New Milford, in which case we would start meeting with them to discuss, the process. And we would do a resolution to affirm that to them.
Tom?
Ellen, we currently are only doing it with New Milford. Is there historically any reason we didn't try to do this with Ordell and New Milford,
Yes,
or Ordell, Paramus, and New
We
Milford?
have a long history of trying to do something with the three towns, which fell apart when Ordell entered into a contract with the Borough of Paramus to do some garbage collection, and at that time, New Milford and River Edge got together and went out to bid. And for many years, we entertained the thought of working with Paramus too, and that didn't seem to work out either.
Okay.
So we were left with this option. That effort has been made and is well documented.
Ed?
Have we ever looked at any other towns that haven't gone through a cooperative to see how much money we're really saving? Like either looking at what they've gotten on a per capita basis, per household basis, per road mile, whatever, because I don't know whether you really get the savings that we think we're getting by doing this joint cooperative or a joint bid for garbage.
No, I don't think we did that analysis.
And then the other thing I'd like to think we should consider is I'd like to see an alternate in there for them to do recycling also. And then, because we've talked about that conceptually, whether it makes more sense to do it in-house versus private pickup, if this is our one chance to get some bids, I'd like to try to work that in as an alternate so we can have an apples-to-apples comparison instead of trying, a couple years ago we tried to do it.
A couple of years ago, John did give us the analysis between...
He gave us his analysis, but we didn't have bids from a company telling us what it would cost to do it outside.
I thought he based it though off of a bid that he...
Because John also wants to give us bids John wants to give us an analysis as to what it would cost us to do all the garbage in-house, because he'll make the argument that it's cheaper to do, even with the equipment and with the manpower, it's cheaper to do it in-house too. So I think if we're doing this process this year, I want to look at all the options and see which way makes the most sense for us going forward. And then, and I know that Paramus now is doing went the other route where they're buying those little single pickup kind of things. We should look at how they're progressing also, because that might be something we want to consider also. I'm just saying, I don't want to limit our options.
With the can that
Yeah, I don't want to limit our options. This is one chance we get every 4 or 5 years to look at one of the biggest expenses in the budget to see if we're doing it the right way. So I'm not against going with other towns, 2 towns, 3 towns, 4 towns. I just want to make sure we look at all the different options.
The more complicated you make it, though, the more difficult it is to do something with another town who doesn't want to have all of those complexities and doesn't want to load up the bid with a bidder, putting that cost of all of that into, a joint bid. So, yes, I mean, you could certainly do all of those options if you're doing it
The only
alone.
option I think that would go for the bid would be the recycling. Everything else is independent of what the other towns do. So I just think if we're going for garbage, I would just say, as an alternate, we should have the recycling in it for the bid. I think we should look at the Paramus scenario and John doing it in-house. That's our own internal kind of evaluation. It's not going to be in the bids.
Paramus does it in-house.
Yes.
In-house has been looked at here several times. I guess we've got a project file from probably the 70s, and maybe some others when we looked at in-house garbage collection.
I think a lot of towns are finding that as they go to the second and third cycles, the bids are going higher and higher and higher because these companies know that over the course of the years, the towns have gotten rid of the personnel, the towns have gotten rid of the equipment, and now they can raise prices as much as they want because you're not going to be able to go back easily and do it in-house. So we got to look at that too. I wouldn't be surprised if we got a big increase no matter how many times we bid it with. I'm just saying, I just want to look at all the options. That's all I'm asking.
All right. Let's explore with River Edge, and then we can. What did you want to do? You wanted to,
Well, maybe look and see what Paramus,
what
What
Paramus is
Promise's
doing?
experience has been with
Okay.
their, how, they had said they started this like a pilot program, maybe talk to the DPW over there and see how...
With the garbage collection bid, you have to have it out to bid for 60 days.
Yeah.
Working backwards, we've always left enough time to go out a second time in case the first bids come in a little bit too high. So we like to be out to bid in the summer. The early part, by July, we like to have our first bid out, which means there's a lot of planning work that has to go on over the next few months. So to have a bid in place by September, ready to roll for October when this one expires. So, I want the council to keep that in mind. While it seems like we have a very large window to work with here, we really don't. There has to be, a lot of work done to get us out on a timely basis if we're going to end up with a bid that we can work with.
Well, I know that when we bid the garbage pickup with New Milford, we saved about $180,000 over the prior contract. So that should definitely be an option to go forward with developing a bid to go out jointly again with New Milford, if they want to. But at the same time, we should explore what they have in Paramus and see if we can get a price from Paramus on doing our garbage, because I know that they are looking to do other towns. That would be that'd be a cost to us to supply all the residents with their cans, and so that would be an option 2. And then I think the option 3 was to get Mr. Lynch to give us another in-house price.
I think there's actually 4. I think you're saying we get a renewal bid.
Yes.
We get from the same company a renewal bid plus recycling.
Yes.
And then there's the Paramus option,
Right.
and then there's the Lynch option.
Yes.
So we're really thinking of concurrently looking at 4 options.
Yeah, but 2 of them are the bid
Still
process.
the New Milford River Edge option.
That's the first
Yes.
option.
Oh, that's first.
Yes. Well, and whatever town wants to join us.
But the
that's-
Paramus one with the one-man operation with the can,
Yes.
cans are not cheap.
No, but they think in the long run that's going to save them a lot of money, and they did float the idea of doing another town. Now, I know haven't had good experience doing Oradell or something else, so I'm not saying that's the answer. I just think this is the one time every 4 or 5 years we have to look at this. We should...
I should also say that I lived in Hackensack when Hackensack went to the one can, okay? And the truck came and picked it up. And the truck broke down 7 times over a period of 3 months. So they just simply put the manpower back on the trucks, and they started doing the trucks by hand. I don't know if all those issues of the arm coming down and picking up.
Don't know, yeah.
I just want to say that was an experience that I had when I lived in Hackensack. Now, that was more than 12 years ago, more than 15 years ago. But, those automatic single can options where you just have a driver picking it up, maybe they've worked it all out, but 15 years ago it was not working. And I think we should be aware of that. We should make sure that the system is working as promised for Paramus.
All right. Do you have enough direction?
We'll put the resolution on, we'll see how the council votes on it, and,
Okay.
so I'm sure you'll vote the resolution up or down on the New Milford option, so.
Animal control contract and the policy for deceased domestic animals.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. If I may, it's brought to our attention that we had a deceased domestic animal, and the effort that should have been made to identify the animal as to whether it was a beloved pet of one of our residents really wasn't made. So I looked to create a policy to ensure that would happen in the future, and we distributed this to Public Works and our health department, our health officer, and out of that came the fact that our prior contract with the Bergen County Animal Shelter did have a process where they would take possession of the animal, they would attempt to identify it, they would scan it, they would maintain it for a certain period of time so that someone could make the effort to retrieve it and, bury it in an appropriate manner. What I think is necessary, rather than having our own policy and procedure here, is to just do a little training with the police department, Department of Public Works, to ensure that they know the details of the contract and how an animal in this situation should be handled in the future. So on that end, I think we can take care of that in-house and take care of that. The council did not enter into our agreement with Bergen County Animal Shelter this year, and we're looking for direction as to we have to, by statute, take care of these animals in a certain manner, so we need direction as to whether you want to go back and revisit that, whether you want to go out to bid, receive other proposals. What's the council's pleasure on having a contract for animal control this year?
I would like us to solicit proposals. I know that during the course of the year, I know the Bergen County Animal Shelter is the one that we historically signed, and I think it's $15,000, don't quote me on that, around there. About
14,000.
14,000 and change?
Yeah.
But I've had two other companies send me literature that they think they could do it for less expensive. So we should have them in and hear their proposals. I'll provide you with the names. I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Okay, Mayor, we can follow up on that. Thank you.
All right. Board discussion, commercial property, buffer area or fencing.
Mayor, if I may, this was a complaint that came to our attention that a commercial property had a fence that was taken down, and the question came to us as to whether the commercial property had an obligation to maintain a fence around their property. We couldn't find anything relating to the original developer's agreement or the site plan. We couldn't find anything in several of the ordinances. So if the council is interested in having an ordinance that would require commercial properties to have a fence or a buffer area, that is something I'd need some legal guidance on, whether it be the borough attorney or the planning board attorney, to provide us with some review of what our ordinances allow or don't allow, and also whether we could develop an ordinance that would mandate that. That's what the council was interested in.
I think, and I apologize, I thought I brought it with me, there was a section in the ordinance that does require where you have two incompatible land uses that requires a buffer. I thought some of the language in there was kind of vague, so if that might what we want to revisit, because it also talks about who's the approving authority, and it doesn't really, this is outside of whether it's a planning or zoning board application, because if it's under the site plan, the planning board and zoning board can basically set the buffer how they want to do it. I think this is for situations like you're talking to, where you may have an existing commercial against a residential, and but there was language in the code under the, I don't know the section, but I can get it to you, but we can get it to Mr. Solo and look at the language and clear it up. Because to me, the intent of the ordinance is to have some sort of separation, physical separation between residential and commercial uses. So whether a fence is defined as a buffer, that's been the subject of land use appeals and stuff. So, but I think we just need to clarify what we want, and then clarify the language to make sure it gets implemented.
We have to make a motion to have...
I could take a look at the ordinance, prepare a memo, work with Alan, and come up with some changes.
I think in this particular instance, we should enforce the ordinance, because in this particular instance, there's a fence that separates the commercial from the residential, and then the fence stops, and there's no fence, and then there's a continuation. It's just a portion of the commercial fence was removed, and the property owner wants that portion of the fence put back. So it seems like a reasonable thing.
But I'm unclear, do we have an ordinance that requires it?
I think my reading of this section was, but I'll forward,
All right, forward it to me, and I'll talk to Tom about it, and we'll see where we go from there. Thank you. That's all I have on that, Mayor.
Okay.
While we're on that topic, if I could just bring something else up. It came up, it's talking about fences. In speaking with Mr. Skirvitz, he had an issue that he wanted to bring to our attention. And I don't know how prevalent it happens, but our fence ordinance requires that we set fences back 6 inches to a foot from the property line. And he's saying what's happening is now people are putting fences back to back, and we're getting these no-man lands between the two fences. And he was asking whether we would consider allowing fences along a property line. I said, I'd bring it to the council's attention. I think in that case, before someone would do that, they'd have a physical mark out of their property line to make sure there's no dispute, but it may be something we want to consider. So if we're looking at fencing in terms of commercial areas, maybe you can just look at the fence part of the ordinance and see whether there's ways we can address his situation. Again, I don't know whether this is happening 1 time, 10 times, or 100 times, but it was enough, I guess, of an issue where he brought it to my attention. So.
Your ordinance now, which most towns have,
6
6
6 inches to a foot. I think, yeah.
and you're looking to put it right up against the
That's what
property line.
he's saying, because I guess most people wouldn't necessarily put back to back, but I guess there's situations where they do, and then he says, then they're
There's like
getting
a big
disputes
gap
who's,
between them.
yeah, and apparently it's become an issue. And again, I don't know how prevalent it is, but he did bring it to my
I think maybe
attention, so I said
bunch of them,
I'd bring it up.
All right. And the next is, we have Mr. Barrett here to make a presentation regarding requested rezoning of an area in town that would include some age-restricted housing.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We have been talking about this property for many years, as you are aware. It's the former Kreisel property. And my client has explored many alternatives to the development of the property. And he has run into a wall, so to speak, in that the prior ordinance, which permitted 46 units, 2-bedroom units, is not, in the opinion of his prospective lender, feasible. And they are unwilling to lend the money to develop the property in that manner. Therefore, he has gone and had plans prepared for an increase in the density on the property to provide for a total of 68 units and then a superintendent's apartment as well, which would require changes in the current ordinance. The economics of the prior project simply don't stand any longer. We now have the housing recovery going on. We have the Hurricane Sandy effect on construction costs, the rise in interest rates, all influence the request for the additional units in the new site plan. The existing plans called for a number of units alongside the railroad tracks, which would have led to perhaps some noise and vibration within those apartments. The new plan eliminates that by reducing the number of units that would be in the rear of the property along the tracks. But also, the proposal for the new building would include elevators, would include sufficient parking so that tandem parking would not be required as it was under the prior approved plan. Also, there's going to be an ability to provide some storage for the residents as well as ramps for senior citizens. There is some competition in the neighborhood, and that is the new Avalon development over by just north of Bloomingdale. That's a high-end property, and this developer wants to compete with them. The proposed changes in the site plan show a building that's 40 feet back from the street, which would be the equivalent to the neighbors along the property. As you can visualize, the buildings across the street on the west side of Kindertamack Road are elevated approximately 20 to 25 feet above grade, so that they would still be relatively higher than this project. The easement from Elizabeth Street onto the property, or the necessity to use the easement as the DPW has requested, they need access to their sewer line. That would be eliminated under this plan, because the project itself could accommodate the jetback, or instead of having to cross over the residential properties on Elizabeth Avenue to gain access to the sewer line, which is along the easterly boundary line of the property. Instead, they would access it from Kennecott Road. In addition, the school impact, which I know is of great concern to this body, would essentially, even though there's an increase in the density, increase in the number of units, would essentially be the same as would have been with the prior plan. There's an increase in students of approximately 8 from the plan. However, that's reduced by the fact that the proposed ordinance requires 20% of the units to be set aside for senior citizen housing, and do not permit anyone under the age of 19 from residing on a permanent basis in those units. Therefore, the actual number of school-age children would probably be in the neighborhood of 6. All of that is, as shown in the study that was previously submitted to the board, to the council back in 2011 by Dr. Lipskin. He's an authority from Rutgers University. He came and testified as to the criteria he used to determine the potential number of students. The real appeal for the project is to the young commuter, because we're talking a project that would be 3/10 of a mile from the railroad station. So there would be access to the, to that, and or to the buses, which are right across the street. Now, I believe an email was sent out to the council. We do have hard copies with us if anybody needs them, and we have also some drawings that were prepared. And this is Mr. Crooks, for those who don't know him, who is the potential developer.
Did anybody copy the
I printed
presentation?
them out, but if they want colored ones.
Are they colored?
No.
No, I want.
Here's the,
How about we just-
these are actually the color drawings of the present, of the boards that come down, if anybody needs the colors.
Thank you.
This is the front of the proposed building. This is what you would see in Kennecott Road. And this is the entranceway, covered entranceway. The ordinance also permits, the proposed ordinance permits some parking in the front yard that would be space for about 8 cars in the front yard that would be parked parallel to Kennecott Road. The side view shows the necessity for dealing with the slope. And this is what you would see as you're coming north on Kennecott Road. This is the side of the property that you see as you make that across.
All right. I'd like to hear from our planner. Mr. Barrett, I believe that the last time you requested the zone change from age restricted to the units, the 2-bedroom units, we had notified everybody within, the council, I think, under Mr. Suresti, had notified everybody within 200 feet.
Correct.
Then we decided to consider the ordinance, but first we submitted it to the planning board for any recommendations and their review. That was the procedure as I understood it, correct?
Well, what happens, Mayor, is that the council would introduce the ordinance on first reading, and at that point the statute requires a submission to the planning board for their review and comment. And then when the mayor and council schedule a second hearing, that's when the public needs to be notified that the ordinance is being considered by the mayor and council, and it gives the public the opportunity to be heard at that time.
Okay, all right. All right, so, any questions, Kathleen?
Just two things. Your email to us said that the new site plan is a superior engineering solution to the sloping property. Was the original plan had subpar engineering?
No, but we've been able to increase the distance from the southerly neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
We increased the distance from this building to the southerly neighbors. That was a great concern of theirs at the planning board, and so this is a superior solution because it's one building rather than the multiple buildings we had before, and also been able to provide contained refuse areas, whereas before they were
Outside.
open.
Mm-hmm.
And that was again a concern of the neighbors. So all of that with this plan, all of those concerns have been now addressed.
And also it says the existing plans units proximity to the railroad tracks are shortcomings. Wasn't that the same thing with the last plan? I mean, it's the vibration and noise and location. What's different about that?
There were a greater number of units that were exposed to the to being, along the railroad tracks. This reduces the number.
That's it for me.
Ellen?
Off-street parking? Did you say there will be off-street parking?
Oh, yes.
And where will that be? Where would that be?
It's.
I mean, or let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
Forgive me, because when you came before the planning board, this was a question I had when I was on the planning board, which I am no longer, but is there enough parking to accommodate visitors so that we won't have a parking on-street problem?
Yes, it meets the RSIS standards, so there's 132 spaces. Yes, the RSIS requires 131.4, and so there are actually 132 spaces provided. And what that is the RSIS requires 1.8 spaces for a studio apartment. We have 6 studios, so that's 10.8 spaces. The one-bedrooms also require 1.8 spaces, and so that would be 48.6. And the 2-bedrooms require 2 spaces, that's 72. So I think that in many of the 1-bedrooms, there'll only be one person, therefore only one car, so that it would provide ample parking for visitors.
Thank you.
And these are condominium units?
No, banks aren't lending for condominiums. These would be rental apartments at this point.
Ed?
One question on the parking. The site plan is not clear, but now, under this proposal, all the parking is going to be outside parking. They're not garaged. Is that correct or not?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, some of it will be underneath, some of it will be underneath the building. But,
It looks like most of them now are outside parking as opposed to, because the other one, everyone had at least one garage, from what I remember, the previous plan.
There's like a tandem.
Well, but they were in the garages. You still had garages. Yeah, they were into a garage, yes. And then they had parking in front of them. And the issue that came before the planning board, that they were not going to assign spaces.
Right.
That was the issue. So anyway, but that's a planning board decision. But I'm just looking at my interpretation of the plan, that's all. I don't want to get into a planning board, but just a couple other questions. Mr. Brown's correct, there was a lot of concern with the buffers, particularly with the people on Elizabeth Street.
Yes.
But if we don't recall, we also had a lot of concerns from the immediate neighbor to the north and south. And one of the times we spent a lot on the planning board was giving them a very dense tree buffer on the north and south property line. That's gone now. And the buildings now are within, I can't scale it, looks like within 10 or 15 feet of the property line. So now the neighbors on north and south have no buffer, they have a driveway, and now they have units, which they're going to come and tell you at the planning board, or they'll come and tell us, literally looking into their houses based on the profile of the building, from the way I can see it. So I don't know if that's been addressed. Do you know right now, like, what size each apartment's going to be in terms of square footage? Because I know the last plan, a lot was made if these were small units, they were like 1,100 square feet. How big is a two-bedroom unit going to be here?
Yeah, once you come on. Mr. Cruz is more familiar with that
Sure, yeah.
aspect than I am.
Regarding the first point, as you know, we went to great lengths to be conscientious to our neighbors. So even though it's not on your current site plan, there will be adequate buffers in forms of fences and/or landscaping. But we haven't gone to that step.
Okay, no, I'm just, you were there also, so you heard all the issues. I said, we're just going to come back and revisit all this, and the board spent a lot of time and effort getting those buffers addressed to make everybody, at least if they weren't happy, they were at least heard, and we were able to address most of their concerns. You know, you're going to get they're getting a development there, and they're going to have to accept what goes there eventually anyway, but I just think this building is like, it's going to be very, very imposing in this area. The height of it, the width of it, compared to what was originally proposed. So I think there's going to be a larger visual impact, and I think that people are going to feel that it's encroaching more into the residential area than the previous plan. And I think that was one of the reasons why the three building concept was sort of to make it feel less, like a better term, bulky. Now we're just going back to one big building. But just getting back to the size, though, are these apartments going to be the same? Are the two bedrooms going to be bigger than what was originally proposed in terms of square footage?
Yes.
And last time, I guess it's not apples to apples anymore because we were talking about condo units. Would the equivalent price point be more or less for a two-bedroom apartment than was originally proposed?
As far as the rental?
Yeah, I mean...
It should be higher. This is to compete against Avalon. That's the market.
This might be a question for Mr. Sarlo, that this 20% set aside, how is that enforced? Is that deed restricted? Do they set aside these specific, 7 and 13 units and say those are only rented to seniors, and how do we enforce that and make sure that it's done?
It's in the developer's agreement.
And you can deed restrict it, but you can also put it in the developer's agreement.
But that's fine after the first person moves out. How do you know that they're always having this, maintaining this 20% mix? If you have to deed restrict
Right.
that.
With their rentals, though.
Yes. Because if you don't deed restrict, or if you don't do this 20% set aside, you're looking at upwards, you can have, based on the school projection, you can have at least 12 additional students come out of that. So anyway, I still have some concerns with the way what's being proposed, but just want to bring those issues up.
All right. I think those issues could all be addressed at the planning board if and when it gets there. The issue now is, do we put the ordinance on for first reading and send it to the planning board for their review and then notify everybody for a public hearing? I think that's what the applicant is asking for.
I make a motion to have this put before the planning board for review.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussions? It seems like with the age-restricted housing, there's not going to be a net increase in school children beyond what we've already approved. It seems like there's going to be a reduction in the number of two-bedroom units under this new plan. It seems like there's a lack of, better buffer zones to the Elizabeth Street residents. It seems like Mr. Crooks will work with the planning board regarding the side property buffer areas, as he did the last time he appeared before the planning board on this case. And the building certainly looks attractive in its current configuration, much nicer than the 3 prior buildings. Anyway, so is there any other discussion?
Is this something that you're going to be doing, or will you be developing this project?
I'll be part of this development team, yes.
Any other discussion? I can have a roll call to put the ordinance on for first reading only.
Councilwoman Murphy?
Yes.
Councilman Capola?
Yes.
Councilwoman Woodsteed?
Yes.
Councilman McDonough?
Yes.
Councilman Esposito?
Yes.
And Councilman Scarpelli?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Can I just make a suggestion that maybe Mr. Barrett notifies the neighbors too that this is coming up, so they don't feel like they're going to be, they're not going to be expecting
Blindsided.
that there's going to be something for the planning board, so,
At what point, Mr. Mignon?
I think to let them know that the planning board's going to be hearing this, because I don't, are you going to be notifying them? It's not a public hearing.
See,
Between the first and second.
right,
There's going to be, this will go to the planning board, but
Correct.
it's not a public hearing, so there's no notice requirements of the neighbors, correct?
that is correct.
So what I'm saying is that the planning board's going to have a hearing, and the people are not going to know about it until this is already here for second reading, or, like they found out the last time, it was already under site plan review when the neighbors found out.
No, well, that's not accurate. What happened the last time is that and we're happy to assist, but it's the borough's obligation to notify the residents when the ordinance is on for a second reading. The statute, and what happened was that the notices were sent out on a Friday, and for some reason, they weren't delivered to the neighbors until Wednesday, and the hearing was the following Monday. And actually, that wasn't on this one. That was on another one.
Yeah,
But in any event,
yeah.
they were notified of the hearing, the second reading, and had the opportunity to be heard. Whatever your pleasure, though, we'll be happy to...
I'm just thinking if there's issues that particularly to do with either the setbacks or the buffers, it doesn't do the residents any good to come and tell the council after the planning board has already looked at it, and some of those issues, if nobody's sitting in the audience, they're not going to think that's necessarily an issue this time.
Okay, but the public is given the opportunity to come here when you are considering it on second reading.
Yes, but then what would our alternative be then? To say, if people came and then say, okay, Mr. Barrett, we're going to send it back to the planning board now to address the issues that were raised at the second reading.
Okay.
Because the planning board's going to happen in the interim. I'm just
Right.
saying, to prevent this from getting kicked down the road.
Happy to discuss it.
Right. And will we send notices to everybody who volunteered?
We'll call them up.
You see what I'm-
There's-
you see what I'm saying?
Ed,
Okay.
there's 2 neighbors, right?
Well, the two immediate, but I think the 4 on Elizabeth Street should also know what's going on also.
Sure, I mean,
so.
they should be thrilled because now instead of being 40...
Whether they are,
100
that's
feet.
not for them to decide, I don't know. But I'm just saying that it's going to make it a better discussion, and you're going to be able to address some issues ahead of time, rather than, I said, have it go to the planning board, they come up, bring it back to us with no changes, and then you're going to have, 20, 30 people here
They'll
saying...
feel ambushed. They're not giving
There's
a
no-
heads up.
We'll be happy to discuss it with you.
That's...
We'll reach out to them. And then, absolutely. We're not looking to create any issues with them or with your process.
Why don't we agree that the property owners within 200 feet will be notified of the planning board review and the final adoption? Can we agree to that?
That's fine.
So we get a first vote, public,
Well, first, they'll introduce it.
Right.
they'll introduce it,
So when-
and then we'll notify the next day.
Right. Do you have any idea when you're going to introduce it, Mayor?
Well, we just voted on introducing it, so
February 3rd?
we'll introduce it on February 3rd.
And the second reading will be the 18th, because we have a holiday instead.
Well,
No, it has to go to the planning board.
Yeah, just like- yeah.
So about 30 days.
yeah, they actually have 45, but...
All right.
So we'll work out the timing.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are past our, we're into our 8 o'clock meeting. Let's, we have our planner here that it was appearing for, I just see it now, Bridget, on the agenda, that you are on for redevelopment acquisition of land for a closed session, which which we were going to hear you from, but given the lateness of the hour, I'll entertain motions to postpone that. Can we postpone that? We can let Bridget go?
Does she want to go, or does she want to come back? Are you ready to go today, or would you rather come back? Would you rather get it done?
Yes, Mr. Barrett.
I was just curious, if you're going to have a public meeting, could you introduce it tonight?
No, we don't,
All right.
we don't have the ordinance. I
We have the
mean, we have it, but our attorney has to review it.
Okay.
Our borough attorney has to
Can't do that.
But isn't that what we had last time, done between the first and second reading? Last time, the review, attorney review happened between the first and second reading last time. I was just saying,
Right.
because I'm not going to be in town, that's why.
Well, you won't necessarily need us here for next week, or do you?
For the public meeting?
So, but second reading.
Introduce it.
No, there's not going to be any notice to the public for the
Correct.
first
You're
reading.
just going to introduce the
We're
ordinance.
just going to introduce the ordinance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Would you like to stay or go?
You want to go to close after the regular meeting, or
When is that, we have a packed house here. I just don't want to keep Bridget waiting here for hours upon hours.
Reschedule.
I'd rather reschedule it.
Reschedule, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Bridget.
Sorry.
Sorry about that. All right, before we close the work session,
Huh?
is there any new business? Consent agenda? All right, we have 5 items on the consent agenda. Does any member of the council want to pull out for separate consideration any item on the consent agenda? I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's go into the 8 o'clock meeting, then we'll go back into the work session and do unfinished business.